April 3rd, 2026, the Islamic Republic of Iran remains locked in a state of high-intensity, asymmetric warfare with the U.S.-led coalition and the State of Israel. This conflict, which erupted in its current catastrophic form on February 28, 2026, has fundamentally altered the geopolitical architecture of the Middle East. The central phenomenon currently under observation is a shift in the Iranian leadership's tactical communication, a transition from bunker-based survivalism to a high-risk display of public defiance optics. The hostilities began with a massive coordinated air and cyber campaign on February 28th, which resulted in the verified death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The strike, characterized by U.S. President Donald Trump as the end of a sick era, also claimed the lives of several senior Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) commanders, including Navy Chief Alireza Tangsiri. In the chaotic aftermath, the Assembly of Experts convened in a secured facility in Qom, which itself was targeted by a secondary Israeli strike on March 3rd, to select a successor. On March 8, 2026, Mojtaba Khamenei, the late leader's second son, was officially announced as the third supreme leader of the Islamic Republic. While Mojtaba has received pledges of allegiance from the IRGC and the Majlis parliament, he has notably remained invisible to the public. Intelligence reports suggest he is operating from a hardened command node, possibly the subterranean Eagle 44 facility, to avoid the ongoing hit list campaign. President Donald Trump, in a televised address on April 1st, remarked, "Regime change was not our goal, but regime change has occurred because the original leaders are all dead. The new group is less radical and much more reasonable." This statement, however, is contradicted by the ascent of Mojtaba, who is viewed by most regional analysts as a hardline ideological purist. Since March 31st, the anniversary of the 1979 referendum, President Masoud Pezeshkian and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi have been observed walking openly in the streets of central Tehran. These appearances, often involving the leaders taking selfies with several hundred hand-picked supporters, represent a radical departure from the strict security protocols seen earlier in the month. On Tuesday, state-run Arabi aired footage of Araghchi shaking hands with civilians in Valley-e-Asr Square. Speaking to a state correspondent, Araghchi stated, "I came to be among them, to draw energy from the movement on the ground, and to enjoy this unity and popular cohesion." Behind the curtain, however, human rights monitors and Israeli military spokespersons suggest a more cynical motive. Dr. Hadi Gami of the Center for Human Rights in Iran noted that the establishment is using loyal crowds as human shields to raise the cost of any assassination attempts. By positioning senior officials in densely populated civilian areas, Tehran is effectively betting that Washington and Jerusalem will hesitate to strike, fearing the global reputational damage of massive civilian collateral damage. As of today, the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively blocked by Iranian sea mine saturation and swarm drone patrols. This has removed approximately 20% of the world's seaborne oil from the market. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas has warned that a sustained blockade could slow the U.S. economy by 2.9 percentage points this quarter. West Texas Intermediate WTI crude has spiked to $98 per barrel, while Brent remains volatile at $100. Negotiation tracks, facilitated by Pakistan and Oman, reached a temporary breakthrough last month when Foreign Minister Araghchi was reportedly removed from the Israeli hit list to allow for back-channel communications. However, these talks have since stalled. Tehran has characterized U.S. peace proposals as unrealistic, demanding full reparations for infrastructure damage and a permanent cessation of decapitation strikes before reopening the world's most vital energy artery. While state media projects resolve in unity, the reality on the ground is more fractured. The January massacre of early 2026, where security forces killed hundreds to suppress anti-government protests, has left a legacy of terror. Rights groups report that the nightly rallies are largely populated by government employees, students on state stipends, and members of the Basij militia. Potential protesters have stayed off the streets after dark, intimidated by the continuing presence of armed men and violent crowds. Since the war began, Iran has reportedly carried out at least 7 rushed executions of political prisoners, signaling that the system is using the fog of war to liquidate internal dissent. From a strategic realist perspective, the current behavior of the Iranian leadership is not a sign of irrational religious fervor, but a calculated survival mechanism intended to exploit the ethical and political constraints of its adversaries. The public walk tactic is a masterpiece of asymmetric deterrence. In the cold logic of power dynamics, the Iranian regime understands that its greatest vulnerability is decapitation, the systematic removal of its decision-making elite. By placing Masoud Pezeshkian and Abbas Araghchi in the middle of a crowd, they are creating a reputational minefield. For the US and Israel, the tactical advantage of killing a foreign minister is currently outweighed by the strategic catastrophe of killing 200 civilians on live television. Tehran is testing the limits of Western liberal warfighting. They are betting that the rules-based order will act as a straitjacket for the US military, even as that same order is ignored by the IRGC. By using the population as biological armor, the regime is effectively turning its own vulnerability into a shield. This is not defiance for the sake of pride, it is defiance for the sake of survival. The regime has weaponized its own civilians against the precision of Western technology. The elevation of Mojtaba Khamenei represents a profound shift from revolutionary republic to clerical monarchy. Historically, transitions of power during a hot war are moments of extreme state fragility. By choosing the son of the deceased leader, the Assembly of Experts opted for biological continuity over theological merit. However, this creates a long-term structural weakness. The 1979 revolution was built on the rejection of hereditary rule, the Pahlavi Shahs. By installing a Shah in a turban, the regime has alienated the last remnants of its intellectual and republican base. For the realist, this suggests that the state is no longer a cause, but a corporation dedicated to its own preservation. Mojtaba's invisibility is his current strength. It preserves the mystique and safety of the office, but it prevents him from building the populist charisma required to lead a nation through a total war. The system is currently stable, but it is a stability built on fear, not faith. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz is the only reason the obliteration campaign has not reached its logical conclusion. President Trump's rhetoric about crushing the regime is constantly being checked by the realities of the global energy market. A $150 barrel of oil would be more damaging to Trump's domestic political standing than a surviving Iranian theocracy. Tehran understands this perfectly. They are using the global economy as a hostage. The Pakistan mediation is a tactical pause, not a sincere effort at peace. By dragging out the talks and branding U.S. proposals as unrealistic, Iran is buying time for its human shield tactics to degrade Western public support for the war. They are waiting for the fatigue factor to set in. In a war of attrition, the side that values life less usually has the advantage. While the U.S.-Israeli campaign has been ruthlessly efficient in terms of kinetic success, it has failed to trigger the regime collapse predicted by neoconservative hawks. Realism dictates that when you kill the moderates or pragmatists within a system, you are left only with the fanatics who have nothing left to lose. By killing the senior cadre, the coalition has forced the IRGC to decentralize. The new group Trump refers to as more reasonable is, in fact, a collection of mid-level officers who have spent their entire careers preparing for this exact asymmetric war. These men do not seek a grand bargain. They seek a grand martyrdom that takes the global economy down with them. Decapitation strikes often remove the only people capable of signing a surrender. Looking ahead, the next 30 days are critical. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, we will see a third wave of strikes targeting Iranian civilian infrastructure, power grids, and water treatment in an attempt to force the population to turn on the regime. However, if the current human shield rallies continue to deter strikes on leadership, the war will settle into a symmetric grind. The Pakistan-Oman channel remains the only pressure valve, preventing a nuclear escalation. If Tehran perceives that the decapitation campaign has moved to Mojtaba himself, they may move toward breakout status as a final act of deterrence. The beating heart of the regime is currently Tehran's streets, but its iron fist is still underwater in the strait. The Islamic Republic is currently a wounded animal, and wounded animals are at their most dangerous when they stop hiding and start standing their ground. The public walks of Pezeshkian and Araghchi are not signs of peace. They are the ultimate provocation. They are telling the world, strike us, and you strike the people you claim to be liberating. It is a strategic trap of the highest order. This has been a Global Report strategic deep dive. The situation in Tehran remains fluid, and the implications for the global energy market are profound. We will continue to monitor the movements of the Iranian leadership and the status of the Hormuz blockade. For Global Report, I am your senior analyst. Power remains the only currency that does not devalue in times of war.